Today's guest is Rajesh Bysani. He began as a product manager in the early 2000s when product management wasn't even a recognized job title. From building e-commerce experiences in India to leading product at Book My Show and RedBus to scaling Brainly to over 350 million users worldwide, Rajesh has lived through the real evolution of tech. In this conversation, we talk about what it takes to grow a product from 0 to 1 and then from 1 to 100. We discuss the messy reality of organizing entire industries, the philosophy of product managers as gatekeepers of time, and the real, not hyped, value of AI in education. It's a story about risk, intuition, and the relentless pursuit of impact. If you enjoy this episode, hit like and subscribe to the channel, because the bigger the channel, the bigger the guests. Hello, Rajesh.
Hey, Jeff. Nice to be here.
I'd like to start with your career journey. How did the evolution look from the early days at Book My Show and RedBus to your CPO role on one of the world's largest EdTech platforms?
Yeah, thanks so much for that question. It gave me an opportunity to really look back on my career and reflect on some of the journey and the path that I took to come here. So I actually became like an accidental product manager, so to speak. I started product management, before product management was even a thing back in 2004, 2005. And the way I discovered product management is actually I started off as a programmer. I was a front-end developer. And, I was working in an e-commerce company at that time. And I knew early on that internet is where I want to do something. I didn't know what, but I just wanted to work in an internet company. And that happened because I had done computer science in my college. So I was looking for internet companies and I got this opportunity. So I started off as a developer, but very soon I realized that what I really like to do is, design and develop experiences for users. So that is where my interest really lied. And even when I was a developer, I would work very closely. Back then it was only online. It was called digital marketing, online marketing. So I would work with the marketing team to design the landing pages, to design the communication, to design the experience there, to look through the funnel. So this is all came very, very naturally to me. And after after I started in programming, within sort of like a year, I got an opportunity to move into online marketing. And that is where I got really involved into product. And that is where I understood product. Because of that, I got opportunity to join this company called Book My Show. Book My Show is sort of like the Ticketmaster equivalent in India. So it's a very large company at this moment. It does movies, plays, sports, all of those ticketing, but also event management. It's a fairly large company. So I was leading the web business over there, which meant like that is where I got into sort of like the first product leadership kind of a role and essentially managing the entire platform in terms of, and, eventually sort of like then moved into proper product management and, then RedBus and the other companies happened and then finally Brainly. I think like one of the biggest differences that has happened over the last few decades is that product management as a function has become a lot more professional. Right now, like if anybody wants to become a product manager, there is just so much material available online, like what systems to approach, what processes to follow, how do you take decisions, how do you prioritize, how do you develop products. There is a lot of material available. There is a lot of help available in terms of mentorship, in terms of like podcasts, in terms of content on YouTube, on various other channels. So yeah, there is a lot of information available. For me, like the biggest challenge, not really challenge, but it was also fun for me was that, most of my learning has happened on my job. Like it is like, hey, this is the problem. This is the number of people that we have. How do we solve this? Right. So everything that I know is because of things that I've done in the past. Right. That's my difference. And in fact, like that's one thing that I had to learn is when I have to translate those learnings, translate that, my own insights into something actionable that everybody can absorb and can understand, right? In form of processes, in form of communication, in form of my thinking. That has been my biggest learning, right? Brainly happened. In fact, when Brainly happened, I had joined Google. And I was at Google at that time, and I was part of the Chrome team working on PWA and AMP, accelerated mobile pages. So the reason I joined Brainly and I moved from India to Krakow is because for a few things. One is it is in the educational sector. So, as a product manager, I felt like most of the tech companies are solving for first world problems. And I really wanted to solve create impactful products, right? Create an world impact in the world, and so-called sort of like the dent in the universe, right? That is what I wanted to create. This opportunity came along. It was in the education field, which was opportunity for me to create impactful products. The team was amazing. The product was amazing. It had all the right ingredients for me to make that risky move in 2019. Risky, I say, not because of from the career perspective, but more from the family perspective, because I was already married at that time. I had a child. So disrupting my family and moving them to a new location is always a challenge.
The challenge.
And that was a riskier aspect. But that's been my very high level journey experience so far.
Okay, it's interesting what you're saying about education sector, that it is some kind of that it kind of attracts people because it allows you to do something more.
Yes.
That's very interesting. But I saw on your LinkedIn your motto that you are driving companies from 0 to 1 and from 1
Yes.
to 100 growth. Could you tell us specific cases where you had to go through both stages?
Yes, yes. So 1 to 100 is pretty much all my experience. So typically, one of the things of my experience that I've been very lucky to do is that I've worked almost exclusively directly with the founders. So what happens is that, an entrepreneur or a founder, they launch a product, they find some kind of a product market fit. They see some growth in that. They raise a series A, series B, and then they look for somebody like me to come and drive the next phase of growth. So this growth, which is, let's say, from series B to exit, has been sort of like my journey in all of my previous companies, including FreeCharge, RedBus, ZoomCar, like all of the companies that I've worked for have had some kind of an exit. And that 1 to 100 journey is essentially where you have found a product market fit in a customer segment in one offering, and then you need product growth to happen, right? Product led growth, which means like focus on consumer experience, focus on retention, standardizing the experience, standardizing the processes, and really growing vertically, right? So going deeper into that area, figuring out what are the other challenges of the ecosystem, what are the other challenges of the consumer that sorry. So one example that I can give you of this 1 to 100 is RedBus, right? And RedBus, I think, is a very interesting experience and one of my favorite experiences that I've had. And the reason that I say that is that RedBus is a bus ticketing aggregator. Okay, so it's very similar to, let's say, not really Flixbus, but similar to Omeo and a few other companies that are there in Europe. But the main difference at RedBus was that, like, bus industry in general was extremely disorganized in India, which means that there was no standard operating principles, there was no standard experience. Even bus stops would be random. So it would be like, hey, on the side of the highway next to this signal, right? That kind of a thing, right? So the biggest product vision that we had was not to just sell a ticket, but to sell a happy journey and sell a predictable, consistent journey, which meant that we had to solve for problems that technically we have no control over. For example, how does the bus stop look like, right? At what time will the bus come? Where would the bus stop on the journey? Because on an average, the bus journey would 10 to 12 hours. So they do multiple stops. So what's the quality of the restroom over there? Do they serve vegetarian food? Because, in India, there are a lot of vegetarians as well. So it is an important thing to consider because they don't eat at stops which serves both vegetarian and non-vegetarian food, right? So giving that kind of insight to the people, like, hey, do you need to carry water or not? Do you need to carry food? Will they provide blanket? How does the bus look like, right? All of those kind of challenges were essentially required to be solved because customers needed a predictable and a safe journey. And in my mind, the mental model was that it should be as predictable as taking a flight. In flight, you go to the airport, there will be a check-in, like there is everything sorted out, right? So that was the experience that we built. And for doing that, we really needed to organize the unorganized sector. So working a lot with the bus operators, giving them information about what is the importance of quality of service. And we had to implement features like ratings and tips and feedback, which bus operators were not happy with. They're like, who are you to rate me, kind of a thing, right? But we had to really drive that point home and organize this completely unorganized sector. And that led to tremendous growth. We measured in terms of number of tickets. When I joined, The company was valued around 10 million. We were doing around 3 to 4,000 transactions a day. And we were able to scale it up to close to 250,000 transactions a day. And the company then exited at $120 million that got acquired by another OTA. So very proud of that journey because it was not just solving for the consumer need, but solving for the entire industry. And now it's organized. It's growing at 10 to 15% annual ARR. And yeah, it's a monopoly. Like RedBus is synonymous with bus ticketing in India. And at the same time, they also launched the same model globally. So they are present in other markets in Asia and in South America as well. So yeah, so that was one journey that like a 1 to 100 growth happened, and like very successful kind of a experience at RedBus. So sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and maybe let's dive a little bit more into that because it sounds complicated.
It
How
is
do
very
you
complicated.
organize a disorganized industry? What specific things you do? Is it more about a communication, changes in the way we speak about things or people speak about them? Or maybe these are, I don't know, actions that you have to, is there a playbook to do that, or you
Yes.
always improvise?
No, so there are, of course, you need to improvise based on what the kind of operators are. But the main, I would say, there were three big paths to this, right? So one was really work closely with the partners who are already technology savvy, right? Who understand that service is important, who understand that tech is important, who understand growth. Like we worked very closely with those 2 or 3 or 4 operators and trying to make them as an example of what a well-run business could look like. And what we noticed was that all the companies that focused on service, focused on consistency in delivery of service, they were the ones whose tickets were booked the first. So we would go to the other operators and show them that, hey, like, look, for this journey, for this date, this operator had 75% occupancy on day 2, while you had 0% occupancy. And the main reason was your ratings, or that you don't have consistent timings. So using that as an example of what an amazing business could be, because all operators in the space, what they wanted is visibility into their business, right? They wanted predictability into their business, like how much business can I expect next month, or 2 weeks down the line. So giving them that data really helped. The second part was that, like, converting all the non-tech companies into tech companies. So we had to actually, we started off as in B2C, but also had to expand to B2B to offer solutions that they could then integrate their inventory and their systems into. So really solving for the businesses as well. Okay, what do they want? How do they worry about their inventory? What are the challenges that they have? What are the problems that they need to be solved? So we expanded into B2B as well and offered a software for them. In fact, it not at RedBus, but at Book My Show, it also had a similar challenge. And we had to go and install computers in cinemas, which was not, we paid for the computers, we paid for the network, and said that, hey, come online, it will be helpful for you and it will help you, kind of a thing, right? So that was the second thing that was important, like really educating them and bringing them on board to this experience, right? And it also expanded to really training the operators into training their staff. Like, how should they greet the passengers? How should the driver act in this in this experience? What should happen? What would you do if there is a conflict that arises because the seat is not available or the seat is not clean? So how would you solve for those challenges, right? So really a lot of, I would say, really working with the operators to solve for some of these challenges was also part of that, right?
Okay.
But, and also, as I mentioned, we also got a lot of pushback in especially things like ratings. And in fact, like one of the things that I remember very clearly was this was back in 2010-11, where GPS and other technologies were not as commonly available as it was right now. But installing a GPS device in the bus already gives you a lot of visibility into the bus location. And
Uh-huh.
even that was something that we had to push for, because that was, that is additional cost of running for the bus operators, and they did not see what is the value in that. So again, we had to push for that and then get it installed and get real-time updates. So a lot of those kind of solutions.
Mhm.
In fact, another example that I can think about is M tickets. Tickets on mobile.
Mhm.
Everything was printed out, right? Like we need printouts because we need a copy of that. Like, it was very similar to how Poland is, right? It was very, very paper heavy. So again, making that change to drive that transformation to make the operators comfortable with the mobile ticket, because that would all impact the consumer experience. That will all impact how the consumers perceive this experience and journey, right? So yeah, so those are some of the things that I would say helped.
I love to hear that because one, it seems like it's not so easy. And your job will not so easy be automated with AI agents because it's
Yeah.
improvisation and so widespread variety of actions that it's impossible to automate. So you're safe. So glad to hear that there are lots of vocations that are safe from AI. But on the other hand, it seems like in order to, let me summarize, I've got it right. In order to grow your product from 1 to 100, you have to sort of go to your target market and adjust it, find the ways where where adjustment is needed, and give something to the industry, to the society. Yes. And that's something I feel as well with Brainly, that you building a Brainly, you change something in the education sector broadly, not only introducing products to sell and sell and sell, but to introduce change. So that's very uplifting to hear. But that was a story from 1 to 100. Do you have a story from 0 to 1 as well?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, like my job was working with the founders to drive the growth of the business, right? To drive the next phase of growth. And that growth happens through vertical growth, but also through horizontal growth. So what that means is that, yes, you're driving growth into the industry, into the product that you have already built. But what are the other challenges and the problems that the users might have that are adjacent, that are aligned with your vision, but at the same time are operating for a different use case? And one of the experiences that I have is actually at a company before Brainly called ZoomCar. So ZoomCar is in the car rental space. So it's similar to Zipcar and all the other traditional car companies over here. But the vision of that company was to improve mobility of people, right? And one of the challenges that, especially in India, is that there is a lot of development happening right now in terms of metros. Right? So there is a lot of metros that are under construction. Every city in India, like I think there are some 20 or 25 metro lines happening at this moment. So there is a lot of development happening in the metro, in the metro area. But the challenge is that Indian cities are extremely large. Like typically, most of the cities are very large, and its last mile connectivity is a big issue. So which is why you have like autos and tuk-tuks and, and all of those kind of things. And at ZoomCar, like what we figured out is one of the good ways to really solve for this is through cycles, and really solving for the cycles on the last mile connectivity, but also provide improving connectivity into a neighborhood significantly impacted the way people travel and navigate. And this was completely something that we built completely from scratch. And again, I'm like very proud proud about that experience, because we were able to scale from pretty much 0 to 100,000 transactions in like 6 months. But the way we got there was also very exciting. So first we did an MVP where we completely offline, no tech experience, right? So we said, okay, I don't want to put any engineers on that. I just want to validate whether there is any demand. So got some second-hand 200 cycles, at very dirt cheap, figured out a small locality in one of the cities, picked up 3-4 very small locality, but high density in that locality, right? That is important, because cycle sharing only works if you have high density, which means like you have enough spots to pick up the cycle, but also enough spots to drop the cycle off, right?
Mhm.
So we started off that as an experiment. Again, this was in, I think, 2015, where, these cycle sharing was big in Europe at that moment. I think the scooters and all also were starting off. Companies like Bolt and everybody were starting off. So in India, it was a big challenge because infra is not there. It's a low trust economy.
Mhm.
There are a lot of other challenges that we had to face, and cycling is also not something that is natural. It's not like Europe, where pretty much everybody has a cycle, right? That was not the case in India. So we had to really pick the locality. We had to pick the right distribution, pick the right messaging to the users. But what was amazing for me was that organically people started using that product, even with zero technology, completely manual. I had to put like people over there to manage the cycles. It was only available in office timings, 9 to 8. So and lock up in the night. So we had to do a lot of these kind of hacks in the MVP stage to get a signal whether people will be willing to do something like that. Once we had that signal, once we know that, okay, this works, then was really designing a cycle for the Indian market, right? Which meant that, gears, people in India are not comfortable with geared cycles. So it had to be gearless, but at the same time powerful. Then we had to design the locks. It needs to be smart lock. We cannot keep charging it. So can we use solar and dynamo technology to keep it charged? Then it had to be adjusted to the Indian's frame. So we worked with the factories in China to custom design a cycle that would handle the Indian challenges, especially like road conditions are not very suited for cycling because we do not have cycle lanes, and there are issues of potholes and stuff like that. So how do you address all of those? How do you address for safety? How do you address for inventory balancing? Like all of those challenges is something that we had to essentially build from scratch because nothing like that existed for the Indian market. So we were able to scale that. We were able to scale that business, and it became, it became a, I would say, sort of like a viral sensation, because in some cities people really loved it. People were like, "Oh, this is amazing." And they were using it regularly. We were not able to scale it beyond a point because then it became sort of like an extremely expensive, kind of thing. But we were able to scale it to, as I mentioned, close to 100,000 transactions a day, meaning 100,000 writes a day, which was amazing. Yeah, so that was one example of zero to one.
It's completely different story when you have to scale up a SaaS solution and
Yes.
yeah, and a solution where you have hardware and offline experience as well. So yeah. Right. And in one of your posts, you wrote that product managers are gatekeepers of time.
Yes.
Can you expand on that philosophy and maybe explain it somehow?
Yeah. Because, yeah, look, as a product manager, one of the questions that I always get is that why do we need product managers? Right?
Yeah. What do you do?
What do product managers do, right? Like just manage the roadmap, that's not it, right?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
yeah, and then when I thought more deeply about it, what I realized is that like all the decisions that PMs take dictates what everybody else spends their time on, right? What the engineers develop, what the designers do, what marketeers do, what everybody else in this organization does is dependent on how the product managers are able to navigate or make decisions, right? And to summarize all of this, I would say the biggest value that the product managers add is really understanding where should we dedicate time and effort on building new stuff. And that is why I said like we are gatekeepers of time, because we need to be responsible for every single minute that is spent by everybody else. We need to feel responsible for that, right? And that meant like really becoming good at decision making, meaning how do we prioritize what needs to be done. And here again, sort of like goes into my philosophy in, what differentiates a great product manager from a average product manager. And the key difference is a great product manager is insight driven, data supported.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So it is very easy to be data driven because you have data, you can use, what I see is that PMs use data as a crutch. They say, oh, data is saying this. So, this is what I did. Oh, sorry, this experiment didn't work. It is all right for an experiment to not work, but a great product manager is right more often than they are wrong. So, meaning like if you have the right intuition, if you have the right gut instinct, if you have the right instinct on what a great product is, that is half of the problem solved. And amazing products are not built by data, are built by insights. Some product manager, some founder has amazing insight and they believe in that, and then they drive to that, even if data is saying something else, or even if the rest of the world is pointing towards other direction, they
Mm-hmm.
believe in their insight and then they go that. So building this product instinct, building this product sense is, in my opinion, the most important skill that a product manager should develop. And
Mm-hmm.
that is really understanding the user, understanding what their needs are, not specifically to the product that you're solving, but really understanding the user to a broader sense. What does their life look like? What does their day look like? What is important for them in their lives? Taking that understanding, mapping it with what solutions can solve for the problem that you're trying to solve in the least amount of time with the right solution, meaning the right approach, is pretty much what the product manager should do. Everything else, like in terms of execution, in terms of road mapping, in terms of driving the team together agile, like all of those, there is a lot of material, there is a lot of things that you can develop and improve. But this is a skill that is the art of product management, right? I always say that
Like
there is a
project management then.
exactly there is a difference between art and science of product management. And the art is where people need to really become good at, right? And that is what differentiates a great product manager from a good product manager. And that is why, that is what I meant by gatekeepers of time.
I love that phrase. And you mentioned that the most important thing is to get the insight, that you build successful product from insights. But where those insights come from, don't they come from
No, yeah, data is one source, right? But you cannot entirely rely on the data. Data will tell you what is happening, but it will not tell you why it is happening. So why are the users dropping out? It will not tell you that, right? So that is why you need to build this 360-degree view of the consumer, which comes from data, which comes from interviews, which comes from research, which comes from feedback, which comes from the mails that they've written, the feedback that they're leaving on your app store, what they're saying, like generally getting a very good understanding. For example, at Brainly, one of the challenges that we face is that the consumers who we are building for is not, not like you and I, right? They are 15-year-old, 16-year-old. So there is like some 3-4 generation gap between me and the user that I'm building for. So how do I get into their mindset, right? How do I really understand what's happening with them? So one thing that I do is use all the apps that they use. So I'm lucky to have sort of like a lot of nieces and nephews in that area. So I keep talking to them, get understanding of what do they do, how do they talk to their friends, what apps do they use, what language do they use. Everything gets me a better understanding about thinking from that perspective, right? What is important for them. At Brainly, what we would also do before the pandemic, when we had like an office space and everything, we would get students to our office and get them to do some kind of collaborative activity, right? Some kind of research, some kind of project that would give us again insight on how the students are tackling a problem. How are they researching? How are they finding solutions? How do they talk to them each other, How do they collaborate? So all of these things together gives us a lot of signals. Another example, for example, at Brainly is that at RedBus, the reason why our insight became so strong was that as PMs, we would spend time at the bus stop when when the consumer is actually waiting for the bus. And that gave us the insight. We could see that, everybody's super anxious.
okay?
Where is the bus? At what time is it going to come? Do I have everything? What tickets do I need? What documents do I need? Should I buy? You could just see the anxiety, right? And we would just go and talk to them and try to understand, okay, how did you book? How did you take a decision? That gave us a lot of understanding about what are the challenges that they have and what are the other problems that product could solve for, right? So this insight, yes, data is one source, but not your only source.
Yeah, and still standing on this bus stop with those people, you can hand out them the leaflets.
Yes. We would show them the app. We would show them, hey, you could have just done this. Like, why are you going to the agent, right? So yeah, but that was a great experience because we really learned a lot from that experience.
And so you're not spending time in front of a computer and in data, but with users and
Yes,
where they are, then learning how are they behave, what are their problems firsthand.
absolutely. Go where your users are. Absolutely.
One thing struck my mind. What is the difference between product management and user experience then? Because I know that, well, when you work with, especially now, because UX was more about user interface
Yeah,
in its early days, but now it's more about the broad context of user, where
correct.
where it interacts with your product, and it somehow resonates with what you're saying.
Yes.
Do you differentiate those two
Yeah,
areas?
user experience is a big part of product management, because at the end of the day, like all the solutioning, all the ideas that you have is translated into the user experience. But product management is a broader area of user experience because product management is in the problem and solution space. So really understanding what the problem is, what the user need is, what is the solution, what solution can we afford at this moment, what is the right approach, what feature set should we have, what does the MVP look like? All of that is part of, product management thinking and decision. And user experience is how the solutioning, like how does now we have identified the problem, we identified the approach. Okay, what is the best way we can actually solve for this problem, right? So UX, user experience, is that aspect of that, right? And it's where the rubber meets the road, so to speak, right? That is where the actual solutioning and your feedback and everything happens. But user experience cannot be great if you do not have great insight on why you are doing this, right? What is the problem? Why are we solving this? What is the best way to solve? If all of this is taken care of, if all of this is amazing, then the user experience more often than not is also amazing.
So product management rather gives an insight and data for user experience to develop solutions. And on the other hand, product manager is closer to CEO.
Yeah, I always struggle with that because like I know that this product manager is CEO of the product is very, very sort of like something that a lot of people say. Yes, closer to CEO, meaning what I mean is that the product manager has to think about all of those different angles, all of the different factors that typically like a UX team will probably not think about. So when, what I say for the consumer, for my PMs is that, yes, you need to be consumer focused, you need to be consumer first, but again, not consumer only, right? Because when you're building a product, when you're building a business, especially in a product-led company, you need to take into consideration the business. Meaning, is this product that you're building, is this feature that you're building solving for consumer need? Yes. But is it improving your business? That is the second question that you need to ask. And third is it improving your competitive advantage? So is it deepening your moat? Is it building something that your competition is not? Is it doing something that is better than your competition? All of these things you need to think about when you're building a product, when you're building a feature. You cannot just take the consumer into consideration. You also need to think about this other things, right? So in that aspect, yes, the PM needs to think like a CEO, but because you also need to take business and competition into consideration.
You scaled Brainly to 350 million users.
Yes.
Let me say that again, 350 million users across 35 countries.
Yep.
Well, that's something that's like a holy grail of all EdTech products. And we all struggle with approaching different markets. It's so difficult in education sector, maybe the most difficult sector in this manner in the world. Can you share what are the biggest differences in EdTech approach between developed and developing markets?
Yeah, great question.
Source and maybe some secret sauce as well.
Yeah. Look, I think so. Couple of things that I think Brainly did differently. One is when you talk about education, there are many different stakeholders in this industry, right? So there is the school, there is the teacher, there is the parent, and then there is a student as well. And you can see that often at tech, there is an option to choose on which of these you can actually prioritize. And what Brainly, as a product philosophy, as a company philosophy, we decided early on that we want to be student first. Okay, which means that we had to solve a product that is solving for the student's need. It is accessible, it is cheap. We do not want to make it very expensive. It's something that every student can take a decision themselves, building for payment options that they have access to. Like all of those challenges come in for us. So that was one thing, right? Being like student first is one of the key reasons for Brainly's success. And here the philosophy is like very simple. When you, let's say you are a software developer in a company, right? And you are tasked with solving for a problem. Nobody is going to judge you if you go to Google and try to find a solution, right? Nobody's trying to judge you that. Even now, like all of us, we are not judged by the knowledge that we have, but we are judged by the actions that we can perform. Why are students held to a different, different barometer or a different standard? Especially in this stage where access to information is pretty much, it's pretty much omnipresent. You cannot contain information and then say, rely on your memory to solve a problem. That seems counterintuitive to us, right? So which is why like we were very, very student focused. But going to a second part of your problem, which was about emerging markets. So one of the big things that I was personally driving was the entire mobile application focus. So that is a big difference between emerging markets and, let's say, Western markets, is that access to internet is primarily through mobile, not primarily only through mobile in emerging markets, right? They do not have access to desktop. They do not have access to a laptop. And most of their internet browsing happens through mobile. And most of the times it's also not their own mobile. Like it's their parents' mobile. They have like 1 hour to use it and they have to focus on that, right? So solving for mobile is something that I did early on when I joined Brainly. I realized, because coming from India, for me, internet and mobile is not different, right? It is like internet is mobile, right? It's only mobile. So I noticed sort of like a big gap in that and started focusing on mobile application and the mobile product. And the product that we built, again, the insight over here is that most of the world still does their studies and homework through textbooks. It's different in US. Like in US, it has evolved a lot right now to screenshots, to PDFs, presentations, like everything is digital, but not in rest of the world. And if imagine, like, if you're studying something on the textbook and then you find a question that you are struggling with, it is so difficult to actually input that math question or the physics question in a computer or in a mobile, right? So we used camera to really solve for that problem. Now it feels like, hindsight, it feels like very obvious. But when we are building that was a new solution. So the experience was, you can just take a photo of the question that you're solving, and we instantly match you to a high quality personalized answer, right? So this drove the growth for us amazingly when it comes to mobile after we built this experience. Of course, we also had to build an organic growth strategy because Brainly in general had very low marketing budget, like almost zero.
Mm-hmm.
And we had to drive all of this growth organically. So we had to figure out how we can drive mobile web users through to the apps without impacting the engagement on the mobile web. And we did that successfully. So long story short, we were able to scale this mobile application in specifically in emerging markets, but also in Western markets. And soon, like within a matter of few quarters, we were able to scale this app to become the number one app in educational category across all the markets that we operated in. In fact, in 21, 22, we had similar or slightly more DAUs than Duolingo.
Mm-hmm.
So, we were the largest EdTech app in the world at that moment. And then we were able to scale it up completely organically on the back of this insight that students use mobile and they use this as a learning companion. And that essentially drove the strategy for us forward as well. Right now, mobile is one of the premium platforms. It contributes to a significant part of the revenue. And it's, and that was the core insight that helped us to drive this experience forward.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting, but you're saying, and I think that it's like a cliche that you have to build a product for your users, build a
Yep.
product user first. It's something that every company says, but what is the differentiating factor here? What was it? I get it that it was a mobile, but how do you find, like in more general approach, how do you generally approach
Yeah.
finding and adjusting to your users? Like,
Sure.
how do you do that?
Absolutely. I think, look, I think thanks for bringing that out because I forgot completely this aspect of localization. So when we are focusing on emerging markets, yes, the access to device, access to the kind of internet and environment that they have is also important. But more important than that is solving for accessibility. And accessibility means the languages, right? So what languages are they studying in? What is the curriculum that they follow? What content do they consume? Because that is what is the biggest need that the students have. And one of the learnings that we had was that even if it's a generic question, like for example, what is photosynthesis? The way it is taught in US, even in different states, is very, very different. So they will teach the same concept, but they will use different words. So it will be called as generation of energy in one market, but in other market it will be, say, plants generating their own food, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or in one market it will be, say, like transforming the energy of the sun to energy that the plants can consume. So very, very different kind of terminology being used to explain the same concept. So really seeding this market with the relevant content is step one. So what we do is when we launch a specific market, what we do is we really collate the content from that market, look at the textbooks, look at the kind of questions that they're asking. Most of these markets also have question banks. So popular questions that are being asked in the tests, in the exams that they use to prepare. So we can use all of that to seed the market. So once you seed the market and once you seed the knowledge base, that is where our growth engine would kick in. Because our typical growth was that the students would discover the Brainly product through Google. So they would go and search for this question on Google, then Brainly would appear through SEO, and then they land it, and then they say, oh wow, this is great, right? But that also brings me to the second part of the philosophy, which was Brainly believed that, and I believe that every student is good at some subject. So they might struggle with math, but they might be amazing at physics. or they might struggle with history, but they might be amazing with English, right? So they're coming for one subject, but then they realize, oh, this is a great way for me to help others and strengthen my knowledge as well. And then they would answer other questions. And that is what the growth engine actually kicked in. And that drove the flywheel effect, right?
Mm-hmm.
We seed the content, users come in, they ask more questions, they answer more, that drives more growth, and that was the growth strategy for us, right? But that was solved through knowledge base, through localization, through curriculum, content, and language, and creating all of this in an accessible, exciting experience that made it easy for users to use and also to recommend it to other friends. That drove the growth for us.
Right. And in your posts, you also mentioned something like compound interest in product development and a series of small improvements instead of silver bullets. Can you give a concrete example of such strategy at
Sure.
Brainly?
Sure. So with compound interest, it's not just with my product management, but also with my life philosophy. I believe even for an amazing life, if it comes to health, money, like anything, it's a series of compound interest. Like you need to keep doing small actions every day and keep growing every day. And that's the approach that I take with everything. But with Brainly, like typically what we do is that when we have our roadmap, when we have our initiatives, there are two broad buckets of initiatives. One bucket is your big swings. So this is where I really, want the teams and me myself to go for 10x, 100x improvements. Like what are those big ideas that can drive the growth of the business, that can drive growth of the product 100x? Like, and it could be crazy ideas. It could be something that is completely out there. In fact, like one of the things that I would say is that let's not do A/B testing, but let's do A/Z testing. What's the 3 or 4 extremely wide experiences that you can think about? For example, if you're doing pricing, instead of doing 10, 11, $15 packages, can we do 10 and $100? Or can we do 10 and $1,000? Just to understand like where, what is that the users are seeking, right? So AZ testing is sort of like a philosophy in that. And when big buckets or big swings, that is what we do. But then there is other bucket, which is about funnel improvements, which is about experience improvements. And here what is important is that compound interest experience, right? It's really understanding, going through the user journey, looking at from the time they land on the page to the first button that they click, what is happening, what does the flow look like, where are they dropping off, what are they engaging with, and then really applying a high velocity experimentation framework that allows you to run multiple experiments, that allows you to keep going forward and to drive that overall experience better, right? And the area that we really applied this very well was in the conversion rate improvement. So Brainly is a freemium product where you get access to free version of the product, and after that you have to upgrade it to continue using the product. So this is the entire user funnel, starting from discovery to registration to subscription. And this is where we applied the compound interest philosophy to really run a lot of experiments to drive that conversion rate for 2x, 3x growth over a period of 2 to 3 years. But that happens by multiple experiments that keep running, keep exploring the entire funnel, figuring out what communication, figuring out what the flow should be, what should keep changing. And it's a constant experience, right? It's a constant improvement and evolution. But it works well when you have a funnel in place, when you have the experience in place, and then you want to improve it, right? And that is where compound interest works best.
Mm-hmm. It all sounds too good to be true. And sorry for saying that, but
it never is. No, it never is. Yeah, of course.
It's never only roses,
yes,
and
never.
Do you maybe have a failure story as well? Somewhere where you started growing a product, but it completely failed.
Yes. Yeah. We have. So one experience that I can think about is this product called Textbook Solutions. And in Poland, you have this product called Odriabame, right? Which is also in the EdTech space. And they essentially are textbook solutions.
Mm-hmm.
So what it does is that instead of having like random question and answers, it provides solutions for the questions that are in a textbook. Okay, so in a textbook you have exercises you have chapters. Within chapters you have exercises, and all of those exercises need solutions, and they could be part of homework or learning or anything that the student might need. So it was not a new product. It is something that existed in the market. It existed in other markets as well, and logically it felt like that is something that the students need, right? And it was also validated by, like I mentioned, by competition, but also something that we learned from our own users. So we built this product, we spent a lot of time and effort into launching this product, made it a very, very clean experience. But what we noticed was that students were not engaging with that as much as we would like to. right? There was a discovery problem. There was also legal issues where we cannot display the question of the question content, because then it gets into copyright issues. It gets into, because the publisher owns the copyright of all the content that is there in the textbook. So we cannot directly use the questions. So we had to figure out the workarounds for that. But eventually, it was not a very clean experience that was not deeply integrated into the product. And the mindset of the students or of Brainly users was also very different, right? They were not coming for all the questions in the textbook. Typically, you do not struggle with all the questions. You want only 2 or 3, help with only 2 or 3 questions, and that is what you need, right? So discovery and finding the question, it's much easier to just search for it rather than going through this textbook experience, which is select the grade, select the textbook, then go through the chapter, look at the question number, then look at the solution. It is slightly more, I would say, friction experience, right? It works great if the students want helps with the entire textbook. And that was the use case for some students, which is why we had some usage, but it was not the majority of the use case. And looking at the general volume in Brainly, like that was a very small number in terms of percentage, right? So that was a failure where we had all the things. We had an insight, we had like validation from the user, we had a great experience, we had great content, but it still did not work because it missed out on one core aspect, that students do not want solutions for all answers, right? And that in my that was a learning, and that made me even if we have all the right ingredients, that made me question all the other solutions that we come up with. Are we missing out any angle over here, right? Does this work for all consumers? Does it work for all user segments? Is there something very crucial or very integral to the solution that we are missing?
Was it a expensive error, or you have somehow prevented it to spread too much?
Expensive. I would say overall, we did not spend a lot of bandwidth on that, meaning like it was not a big team, it was a small team. But in terms of time that we could have used, it's essentially boils down to opportunity cost. We could have used that time to build something else. And that is the loss that I would say, right? But in terms of the effort, yes, we put a lot of time and effort on that product.
Right. Moving forward, Brainly implemented AI Tutor as well, which
Yes.
leverages a base of over 250 million moderated answers. What does the process of creating such an advanced AI system look like in practice?
Yes. Yeah, great question. And that is the question that we started off with, right? Like if we have to build AI tutor for learning, what should it be, right? What it should be like, right? And there are few kind of, let's say, principles that we adopted. So when it comes to the mental framework that we used was that we spoke to real tutors, right? Real tutors, and we said that what according to you is a good tutor, right? And one of the things that this tutor mentioned was that I cannot be wrong. If somebody's coming to me, I cannot be 99% accurate, I cannot be 96% accurate, I have to be 100% accurate, right? So that is one big guiding principle of our AI. Like it has to be right, it cannot be wrong. Because if you're wrong, then it loses the trust. If you're wrong even one time out of 100 times, you will not trust the other 99 answers. So how do you build high trust responses is one of the challenges. And as you know, AI, LLMs in general are probabilistic models. They are not deterministic models. So there is always this margin of error, but the biggest challenge is how do you make it error free or build in other solutions that can solve for that error, right? So that one. Second thing is that what great tutors do is that they adjust their approach based on that student. So if they know that the student is struggling with something, or if they know that there is a specific way to talk to that student, they do that, right? And that is another thing, right? How do you personalize this experience to not just the level of the student, but to each individual student, right? To what they know, what are they struggling with? Did they miss any chapter like 3 weeks down the line that is impacting their understanding? There are so many things that are connected over here, right? So that is the second big, guiding principle. And the third thing, which is very, very important, is that a tutor never, even if the student doesn't understand anything, never makes the student feel like they are not smart enough to understand. So they always see that, okay, maybe my method is wrong. I need to change my method to explain, but it's not the student's fault that they are not understanding, right? So these are the three major things that in general, LLMs are not great with. So they are we all know like accuracy is a problem. They have this problem of what is it called? I forgot the word, but they have this problem of confidently saying the wrong thing, right? So that is something that needed to be solved. Personalizing required really understanding the content, really understanding what the source material is, really understanding the student through their previous experiences, and then personalizing the answer for them. So the structure, the length, the content, the vocabulary, all of this need to be personalized to every single student, right? And the third thing is tone, which is something that you can handle, that is something that you can manage, right? But we spent a lot of time in the first area, which is building that trust for the users. So if you go to Brainly right now and ask a question, we provide you a very high quality answer, but we provide you a lot of trust signals. So we show you the ratings that other students have provided. We show you sources, textbook sources, where this answer has been referenced. So it gives you, and the answer is adjusted based to the textbook source as well, right? So we know that this answer is coming from a reputed published textbook, which is trustworthy. And then one of the things that we realized is that typically students, especially when they are asking a question in LLMs, they have the tendency to ask the same question across multiple LLMs. And if all the LLMs are saying the same thing, then they say that, okay, it's correct, right? So to solve for that, we also gave tabs for other LLMs on Brainly. So if you go to Brainly and search for an answer, you will get an answer from Brainly, but we'll also find a tab to compare that answer with ChatGPT and Gemini. Right. So this is another way for us to show that you can compare these answers. You don't need to go there, but that is only required in the first few experiences for the students. Once they trust the answer, then they don't do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that I would say is a big challenge, because as I mentioned, LLMs in general are probabilistic, and creating deterministic experiences out of that is the biggest challenge in AI in general, right? So providing the right guidelines, providing the right prompt engineering, providing the right source material to the AI becomes absolutely crucial.
So were they a technical or product challenges?
It is a combination of both.
Okay. You often talk about separating hype from reality in the context of AI. Where do you currently see real value of AI in education? And where is it just marketing?
Yeah, look, with all great technology, you will always have this hype cycle, right? I think like right now we are on the downtrend of the hype cycle at this moment when it comes to AI. Like there was a lot of, general intelligence is around the corner, just 2 years away. It's going to be some time away, right? It's not going to be like 2 years, probably like decades away. We have reached a stage where most of the improvement on the AIs is not happening on the content and not happening on the responses. If you look at the evolution of ChatGPT 4 to 5, right? Or if you look at any great AI development that has happened in the last few months, most of this has been in the form of content type. So image, videos, all of that are becoming better. But what we are also noticing is that a lot of AIs are solving for experiences. So they are picking up few categories and going deeper into that. So I would say, like, when it comes to hype of AIs in education, yes, couple of years ago, there was a lot of hype. This is going to revolutionize education. It is going to solve for a lot of problems. Yes, a lot of those problems can be solved using AI, especially when it comes to access to access to learning and education, right? That is going to be the biggest impact that it is going to create. Is that already happened? I would say to some extent, what has happened is the change in user behavior. So one thing that I observe is that my son and that age group, they do not Google anymore. They do not go to Google, right? Google was something that was, anytime we want to search something, it was very natural to us. We still use Google. They don't. They go to ChatGPT. They go to Gemini. They go to other AI tools, right? That is their first destination that they go for any problem that they have. And I feel like that is a big user behavior shift that is happening. And eventually it could also lead to solving for much more deeper challenges, right? But education in general, the thing is that, education, if you want to impact education, it needs to be done at systemic level. Right? So what I mean by that is that it needs to be done at the government level. It needs to be done at the policy level. It needs to be done at the school education system level, right? And all of these changes are not going to happen in a matter of years. They take decades to change anything, right? That is there. But what I say, and what the biggest impact that I feel is that AI can play a very, very big role in making a good teacher a great teacher. Okay. And again, to go a little bit deeper into that,
Uh-huh.
We've all had experiences in schools where we had amazing teachers and we love that subject and we love that experience, but we also had our own share of teachers who were not interested, or who were just going through that motions.
Yeah.
But keep in mind, like, nobody becomes a teacher because they want that money, or nobody becomes a teacher because they just want to do that, right? They become a teacher because they really believe in education. What happens is that there is just so much bureaucracy, there is so much paperwork, there is so much other things that happens in their lives that they are not able to spend that time and effort in teaching. But
Uh-huh.
with AI, they can really leverage that AI to bridge that gap, to solve for the problems that each individual student has, right? And tailor that teaching, tailor that method, tailor that methodology based on what individual student needs. And that is where I feel like a biggest impact is going to happen, where teachers adopt AI to really become great teachers. And I see that happening in some teachers. I see that happening in some schools. Some schools and teachers are very AI positive, and they are using it to a lot of things, like setting the content, setting the tests, all of those kind of things. But even using it for repetitive tasks like, grading, for example, like, it's a great area where AI can really solve for that problem, right? So, or for homework also, for instance, like creating homework plans, like creating the study plan, like all of these things is something that they can leverage AI, but provided, like I mentioned, the challenges that we had at Brainly to make it ensure that it is accurate, it is tailored, it is trustworthy, all of these things, if you solve for that, that's the area where AI can play a tremendous role from an impact perspective.
So I feel like we both would agree with the statement that AI should be perceived as an enabler, not as
Absolutely.
as a threat. And you said that it takes like generations to get those tools into schools for teachers. So maybe in practice, how do you imagine that? How do you convince teachers and parents as well to adopt this perspective and maybe tooling?
Yeah. So, I would say, like, early on, when this entire revolution started, like around a couple of years ago, there was a lot of apprehension and a lot of pushback from the schools and the teachers. And that is also because, at that moment, it was not, the responses were, I think, 70% or 75% accurate when it comes to education. That has changed quite a lot in the last few months. And uh, there is a increased awareness, and there is increased adoption of some of these tools. Yes, at a school level, at a district level, it is still difficult because, you need to convince the district, you need to convince the school when it comes to, US and other markets. But at an individual teacher level, I know that teachers are using this, sometimes paying for the tools out of their own pocket, sometimes adopting the tools themselves because they know that it is going to help them. So I can see some of the teachers really adapting for this tools. But like I mentioned, it needs to be done at a policy level where, something, for example, what US did, right? If there is some guidelines that is set at a global level, at a national level, that, okay, this is how we think about AI, this is how we should be using AI, these are the tools that we can use, these are the aspects that you can adapt, that will give a lot more confidence to the schools and teachers to also adapt for that, right? Yeah, so I would say those are some of the things for this.
Okay. And looking at the next 3 to 5 years, if you had to bet on one area where AI will have the biggest impact on education, what would it be and why?
Next 3 to 5 years is a long time away. I feel like,
I
like,
know.
things are changing so rapidly, like every 6 months, I have a different
Last
view.
year, about 3 to 5 days, actually.
Yeah, exactly. It just keeps changing so often, right? Look, based on user behavior, based on the learnings that I'm seeing around me, what I think is that in the next 1 year at least, this AI tutoring bit is going to take off.
Uh-huh.
I see a lot of companies already spending a lot of time and effort in doing that, including Brainly. We are building, like, very targeted, helpful, impactful solutions. And this is one area where, given that students are becoming very, very comfortable with AI, this is one area where, you are going to have increased adoption of this technology, right? And the experience that we are envisioning is that not like a chatbot, not like something that you can just ask a question to, but as a companion who sits with you throughout your learning experience,
Uh-huh.
right? Like a learning companion that accompanies you throughout your learning journey, throughout your schooling journey, right? So same way to what a tutor would do. When a tutor sits next to you, they do not give you directly the solution, right? So they say that, okay, what approach would you take over here? We solved this problem, and this problem is similar to the other problem that you did. Will you try doing this kind of a thing, right? So that experience, like replicating that experience in AI, replicating that experience through AI tools, is going to be the key to solve for that AI learning experience, right? You keep a camera on, you show the textbook that you're working on, show the material that you're working, share the PDF, create that context and create this class-like experience on AI tutoring. I think like that is where the biggest adoption can happen in the next 12 months, 12 to 18 months. I would say that will be the biggest impact.
Isn't it like a little bit like with the AGH race that everyone is speaking up like since 2 years that the general intelligence is around the corner? And isn't it the same problem that it seems so close to solve the
Yeah.
learning assistant, let's say. It seems so easy to be solved right away. But on the other hand, we have some kind of technological glitches that are very difficult to solve. And maybe this will be a race that we will be struggling to reach.
Yeah, look, I think technological challenges will be there, but I think the advances that have happened in the last few years, and also like last couple of years, we have also spent a lot of time in understanding these technologies, right?
Mhm.
So that has also given us a lot of confidence in solving for this problem and building this problem, right? Because it's not just about, again, like, it's not just about the technology capabilities, but it's also the experience that you're wrapping this around, right? The student also needs to feel comfortable with going to this experience, asking the right questions, and come away with this experience feeling that they learned something. So that experience from a product and user experience perspective is also very critical to solve for. But from a tech capability perspective, I think we are there. Meaning like we are 90% there. Like there are going to be some corner cases. Yes, when it comes to look again, since I'm biased by Brainly and Brainly focuses on high school students largely, I think in the school subjects and the kind of problems that a high school student asks, those generally do not have a problem. Like I would say, most of the problems we can solve, most of the challenges we can address. The challenge lies in advanced learning when it comes to colleges, when it comes to master's degrees, when the kind of questions and the kind of solutions are very, very different. That is a challenge. That is something that AI can still not do a great job in solving, because the quality of answers, quality of responses are not up to the mark that a college professor might expect. And that is where some gap could arise. But for a high school student, I think, like I mentioned, we are 90% there.
I feel like we're 99% there, but I have the notion like with the Windows progress bar that the 1% will take ages.
Some more, yes. Yeah, but that's true with anything, right? Like 1% will always be there, right?
Yes, exactly. Right. I'd like to move to the last section with a few questions about your advice for founders and product managers. So maybe first of all, for EdTech founders who are just starting their journey, what are the most common mistakes you see and how to avoid them?
Good question. I think, look, in terms of more than the mistakes, I would say like the approach that I would take, like if I have to build an edtech company from scratch, like the approach that I would take right now is couple of things. One is really pick the market that you want to address first. By market, I mean the customer segment, right? So either you want to go students or schools or teachers, or what is the first ecosystem that you want to address, or the stakeholder that you want to address, right? Typically what happens is that, and a lot of edtech companies try to solve for many of these challenges. They solve for teachers also, they solve for schools also, they solve for students also, and they gets overwhelming, right? Because especially when it comes to schooling systems, there is just so much variability in that. There is so much differences between schools, between learning systems. So pick one area very well, right? It could, or within that also, you could pick up one use case. So once you figure out like, okay, we need to do schools first or students first, then pick one use case. Like Brainly did with homework. In India, a lot of successful edtech companies did with test prep. So pick one use case and become really, really, really good at that, right? So that would be the other thing. And the last thing would be really pick your market extremely wisely. Like start with one market, which is sizable enough, which is standardized enough, which gives you the right coverage, which gives you the right reach, and also the right availability in terms of propensity to pay. Like people are willing to pay for that market. Because for example, like in India, apart from test prep or any other markets like India, Indonesia, take any emerging markets, apart from test prep, it's extremely difficult to make money in EdTech.
Mm-hmm.
Test prep, they pay money because your performance in those entrance exams, in those standardized tests, is directly proportional to the kind of job that you would get, to the kind of life that you could lead, right? So if you are able to do well in those exams, then you have a good life, which is why there is so much money that goes into that. So in India, like after your basics are taken care of, education is the biggest share of wallet in all other emerging markets, because when you're coming from a emerging country, when you're coming from a low GDP country, education is the only ticket for a better life. So which is why test prep works very well over there, but not the others, not like homework, not like anything else, because only thing that matters there is grades. So pick the right use case, pick the right market, and prioritize for one of the stakeholders and build for them.
That's, I feel like an important thing to stress out, that in education, not all of your participants, like stakeholders or students or teachers, not all of them are your revenue stream, and not
They're not.
always. So you have to carefully find out for who you are targeting your product and who will be paying for that. So
Yes.
usually in education, it's a different person. Someone pays for the user so it can use your product. So it's, I guess it's a valuable thing to have in mind starting.
Even for example, when you go student first, right? Let's say for test preps in India, right? You're building your product for the student, but the decision maker is going to be the parent. Right? So then you need to address the parent's needs. Like what does the parent need from this service? What are the problems that they have? Which is why, like, if you go to any test prep company in India, they would just show the previous example, previous results. They would say, oh, we got top 3 ranks in the top 5 rank. All of those kind of things that tells the parents that, okay, this is the right investment for them to do. And these are not cheap. Like even by global standards, none of these courses, none of these are cheap. It's a very big share of wallet for the students, for the parents. And, which is why, like, there's a lot of focus on building that brand, building that trust where the parents feel comfortable. But yeah, to your point, yes, even if you're picking a stakeholder, the decision maker will be somebody else. Even if you go to schools, individual principals and schools will be the consumers, but the decision will probably be made by the school, the state educational body, or it will be made by the school district. So that requires a different kind of an approach, right? So picking your right stakeholders and understanding where you can build revenue is the key, right? Is very important.
As your experience spans different sectors, what universal product management principles work everywhere, and what's specific to EdTech?
Yeah, great question again. I would say, like, when it comes to building a product experience, most of the learnings, most of the principles translate well across industries. Okay. So the core principles that I have is, and I alluded to this earlier as well, but really strengthen your insight about your consumer. Like, what are they doing? Why do they need this product? What are the needs? Have a very, 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 very strong understanding about the user, right? I think that is like a principle that goes across industries. The second thing is that be very careful about what are the things that you're prioritizing. So, spend a lot more time in prioritization, decide what needs to be built. And once you have that roadmap, do not be scared to be flexible with that. Because in today's world, especially, like every couple of weeks, you will have new opportunity that presents itself. Either in types of a consumer insight or a new technology capability that has come up, or something else that gives you the opportunity to build something more, right? So yes, you do all of these things, have a roadmap, but be flexible enough to change those priorities, be flexible enough to change those initiatives, because at the end of the day, the goal is that you want to maximize the output of the business, output of the company, and that can be done through building great products. So that's the second thing that also translates pretty well. And the last thing I would say is that, and this is something that I keep going forward, back and forth on, but my current understanding is that, gone are the days of creating very basic MVPs. Meaning, like early, 5-6 years ago, you could just put a form, do a basic experience and you're done, right? Now it's not the case. You have to have polished products that you're releasing. They need to look good. They need to be great. They need to solve the problem. They need to be amazing, right? So the quality of product that you're releasing, even as an MVP, has to be amazing. It doesn't mean that it solves for all the use cases. It doesn't mean that it's a full-fledged product, but the MVP that you're building has to be amazing. right? Means that it needs to have the right user interface. It needs to have the right user experience. It cannot be like a, you know, like a vibe coded thing that you're releasing out there. That doesn't work in products anymore, right? You need to have like, and that is because the expectation of the users are increasing quite a lot. And I'll give you an very interesting example over here. My 9-year-old son, whenever he orders anything on Amazon, the question that he asked me is that, why cannot I see on map where my product is? And for him, it's like, when I book a cab, I can see that. When I book food, when I order food, I can see that. So why cannot I see on Amazon or Allegro, right? So the expectation is like industry across, like, you know, every improvement that happens across some other industry also impacts your industry. So the quality of experience has to be like one of the core principles that you believe in, that you deliver from, and deliver with quality is extremely important in this scenario, right? So these are the three things that I would say translates across multiple industries.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to edtech,
Yeah, and I wanted to ask, what's specific about EdTech, maybe? What's
yeah.
differentiating?
And specific about edtech, like I was mentioning, is that, look, in a lot of countries, in a lot of markets, education is a ticket to the better life.
Mm-hmm.
So the importance that people give for education is much higher. So when you put out anything, any piece of experience out there, it has to be accurate. It has to be 100% correct. The chance of a wrong answer has a lot of negative implications for the students, for their lives. Like if they completely rely on you, and, you know, you're not providing, let's say, the right support, they might not do good in grades, and that would impact their future. So, you know, you have to be very mindful of that. Like education, especially in emerging markets, has a direct impact on their future of that student, of the future of their kid.
Mm-hmm.
And that puts in more effort and more, I would say, pressure in a way on the kind of experience and the product that we build. So it's not just about solving the user need, but it's about understanding the user and building the right experience for them, which helps them be successful in school. And that is the key differentiator over here.
Okay, interesting. Right. And to finish up, to wrap the conversation up, I wanted to get back to the product manager perspective. And we stated that probably product management is AI safe and future prone.
I don't know that.
Let's hope for that, at least. So let's imagine a scenario in which a young product manager wanted to follow a similar path of yours. And what skills should they develop today to be prepared for the future of AI-driven product management?
Yeah. Look, couple of things specifically on the AI management, in product management. One is that I think I alluded to this in terms of like building strong insights and building strong product instinct, right? And one of the great ways to really build that instinct is to do product breakdowns, product teardowns. So what it means is that you take any product, any experience that is out there, and you try to break it down and understand what is the thinking or the decision making that would have gone behind this particular experience. So if you open up Uber and you see some experience like, okay, you know, you get the premium on top or you get Uber X, like what did the product manager or the team that was building this, what is the decision that they went through? What were the other options that they might have had that they did not go through, and why not? So just going through this process of breaking down an existing product and thinking through what the PM would have done helps you build a stronger product sense and build a stronger insight about building the right solutions for the product, right? And this should not be limited to any particular industry. Go industry wide, go as wide as possible, and just think through what might have happened in their boardrooms, what might have happened in their meeting rooms, what decisions, and what is the journey that that team took to come up with this, right? That helps you really strengthen and sharpen your product insight. And that's a skill that I believe that all PMs should have. The second thing specifically in the AI domain is that for sure, like be comfortable with vibe coding. And what I say with that is not for releasing that product out for the users, but to better communicate your idea, to better represent what you want to build, better showcase the solution that you're proposing. And that is a great tool that you can use. You do not have to rely on wireframes. You do not have to rely on product notes. Yes, those documentation is important, but a visual form of communication is the most well understood form of communication. So if you are getting more visual in that, be comfortable with those tools, code yourself, design yourself, create all of those, and do not think the product manager's job is just to be a paper pusher. You're not that. You are really defining the solution and take ownership of that and define that and become better at that, right? So those are the two things that I would call out at this moment.
Lovely. And sadly, we have to put a full stop here. And I must say that I had to skip a few questions that I had to you because this conversation will take like 5 hours or more. And thank you for your time. Thank you for this conversation, which was very packed with case studies and your exceptional knowledge. Hope for another one. And for today, thank you for this conversation, Rajesh.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Christoph, for inviting. It was a pleasure talking here and also to, to reflect and to relook at my experience. It's always fun to do that.